This is such a great date.
It is. You know, like my favorite part is definitely talking about what you do for work at CNN. You want to tell me more about that?
Sure. I mean, I'm a producer at CNN. I'm a pretty big deal.
Oh, so you get to pick like what people talk about.
I do.
You?
Yeah. It's quite interesting, the things that, we decide to choose to talk about. And,
wow. It's pretty attractive. Do they ever ask you to like lie or anything?
Well, I mean,
oh,
yes.
Definitely.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they do. They listen. You and I are close.
Yes,
we've
of
worked
course.
together. I mean, it's
First
fine
date,
for me to tell you.
It's of course. This is
and
going somewhere.
I'm in love with you. So
on the first date, yes.
Well, I'm here to tell you that. And also, yes, I lie for CNN. But I would never lie to you.
Okay, well, tell me more then. I'm like so curious. Like, what do they ask you to lie about? And can you say it really loud, just so I want to make sure I hear it correctly?
Okay, is this loud enough?
Yes.
Perfect. As a CNN producer, they tell me to lie about the truth for their agenda.
Wow. Okay, can you say that one more time and also put your name in there?
I will, producer, lie for a living.
Oh my gosh, that's great. Unfortunately, I'm so sorry. Like while you were saying that, my mom texted me. She's having an emergency. I have to go, but I really want to see you again. Is that okay?
Yes, I would love to.
Okay, great.
Please.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.
2 weeks later.
I did not say any of those things. They are erroneous lies.
Sir,
by
I'm
the
a reporter
leftist.
from Project Veritas. Do you really want to tell what you told one of our operatives?
I didn't tell her anything.
You told her you were lying at CNN, that you chose
No, I told her I was in love.
You told her you had an agenda.
She betrayed me.
You told her you were in love on a first date?
No.
Just side note.
No.
Okay, sir. Project Veritas has clearly shown in its reporting and in this video that this man is a liar. The CNN is lying to you.
I'm not lying.
Okay, sir. Goodbye.
Will she call me again?
I believe in love at first sight.
Yeah.
Love at first whistle blow.
Will not be getting a call, ladies and gentlemen.
Sad.
But welcome to Will and Amala Live. Before I get into what this show is going to have in it today, I want to tell you guys we are streaming on a new channel that is called Will and Amala Live. So while we're streaming here on PragerU, we're also streaming over there. That is eventually going to be our new channel where we are streaming exclusively. We're also going to cut clips from our show. You guys said you wanted clips. And Will and Amala Live is going to have its own channel. So go head over there and subscribe. The link will be in the description down below. Again, we are going to be eventually moving over there. On today's show, we opened with a Project Veritas skit for a reason, because the leader, the CEO, James O'Keefe, did an interview with us to talk about the propaganda that he finds and his new book, American Muckraker. Plus, we have another interview with Corey DeAngelis, school choice here in this nation, talking about that sort of decision that we need to go through with public schools in our nation. Also, we're going to be doing Dear Will and Amala, so stick around for all that. Hi, everybody. Special guest on the show today, CEO of Project Veritas, James O'Keefe, who has been exposing lies and propaganda for years and years now. You're probably seeing his face now because of what he's exposing behind COVID-19. James, thank you so much for being on Will and Amala Live.
Great to be with you guys.
We got to get into these Fauci leaks. We'll get into some stuff on your book, but all of this, I mean, Dr. Fauci, under oath, has come and said, oh, we don't know about gain-of-function research. We know nothing about that. I mean, in testifying about this, and you have now just released new documents to show that all of these things that he was saying are absolutely lies. It's hogwash. Talk about those documents that you guys have seen.
Yeah, well, last week, a source came to us with documents inside the Department of Defense, literal Pentagon papers. This was DARPA is a division of the Department of Defense, Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. And in these documents, which were authored by a Marine Corps Major Fellow at DARPA, so highly credible military documents, showed that this EcoHealth Alliance group approached the Department of Defense, and the Defense Department rejected it on research on gain of function on bat-borne coronaviruses because it was too dangerous, precisely for the situation we find ourselves in today. The documents also allege that Anthony Fauci, who was the head of NIAID at the time, authorized proceeding with this research. So these documents would seem to indicate Anthony Fauci lied under oath. Anthony Fauci was grilled about this in the Senate last week, brought me up, brought the documents up, in fact, authenticated the documents, but basically attacked this Marine Corps major. So we just want Fauci to release more documents, or frankly, if he won't, Project Veritas will.
As you guys should. I mean, there is so much out there that this guy has lied about. He has been in there since 1984, right? And what has happened to public health in this country? It is diminished. I mean, we are behind Costa Rica, and the amount of money that we spend on pharmaceuticals is some of the highest in the entire world. Yet, we were once one of the healthiest nations, now to one of the most unhealthy nations throughout the world. And this is because of people like Dr. Fauci. Have you seen anything else? Are you expecting any other whistleblowing about this man and anything else that's happened with the pandemic and what they've known?
Well, definitely. I mean, you can't question the orthodoxy, the narrative. We live in a country and we live in a world, and this is what I talk about in this book, American Muckraker, a world where the FBI and the New York Times are acting in concert, where pharmaceutical companies, it comes out yesterday, a document from the Department of Justice, Tom Fitton at Judicial Watch, released a document saying that the New York Times, the Pfizer Pharmaceutical was in communication with the FBI about me. Now, why the hell is the Federal Bureau of Investigation talking to pharmaceutical companies about journalists? And where's the fourth estate? So we need people on the inside. And by the way, there are a lot of good people in the government. We always criticize these administrative agencies. I would say there's probably the majority of them are decent people, but they can't do anything about it. And the people in the Marines aren't going to blow the whistle. They took an oath. But what this Marine Corps major told us on the record, by the way, and he was not the source of the documents. There was another source. We just contacted him for comment. And Joe Murphy, the Marine fellow at DARPA, told us, hey, there's a lot of good people, James, inside the government, and hopefully they too do the right thing. Next week, Will, we have another story, follow up to this one, about these 5-year-old kids, 5 to 11 years old, getting the vaccine. Blockbuster bombshell video showing the effects on children. And by the way, people think, well, this is an anti-vax thing. Well, let me tell you something. The people who are pro-vax are going to be more outraged by our revelations coming than these anti-vaxxers.
The narrative is collapsing. The narrative is collapsing.
It is. And I want to ask you, why do you think this is happening? Because you're really pointing a light on really the scope of this. You have big pharmaceutical companies working with agencies of our government, the FBI, the DOJ, working with our media corporations. Why is this happening, and what is their goal here, do you think?
Well, I think I wrote a chapter in this book called Power, and it's a tale as old as time. Power tends to corrupt, as Lord Acton reminds us, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And when you have journalism decimated because the newspapers have all fallen away and tech now controls the means of distributing information, you have a couple, Washington Post, New York Times, that's about it. And they've gotten too cozy with their sources inside the government. They don't want to bite the hand that feeds them. There's always been this tension in journalism between access to the information and being adversarial. I think we strike that balance pretty well at Veritas because we use hidden cameras, so we don't have such a conflict. But you've had this problem in the media where they're funded by Pfizer Pharmaceutical at CNN, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer, brought to you by Pfizer. And at ABC News, which slashed its investigative budgets, now they sell comic books and Disney products. They're owned by Disney. You had them spike the Jeff Epstein story a couple of years ago because they didn't want to jeopardize their sources inside the British royal family. Now look how Prince Andrew is doing. Journalism is dead. And the only way for us to revive it is for citizens, you and I, the people watching this broadcast, who work for the Department of Justice, who work for a pharmaceutical company, people like Melissa at Pfizer, blew the whistle in September and gave us emails. And the emails written by Vanessa Gelman, the senior director at Pfizer, said they were lying to their own customers. They were trying to hide the vaccine was using fetal cells in the development. And the whole point of journalism is to make public what powerful people want hidden. And that's what we need citizens to do. This book tells you how to do it. It's going to require some struggle, some sacrifice, some suffering, but you're going to suffer no matter what. We just ask you do it for the right cause.
Yeah, I mean, with all this stuff with Fauci and big pharma and what's going on there, I mean, Fauci will take the drug patents, sell them to universities, right? And then he splits the patents with them and then walks them through the FDA approval process. And then he's able to profit off this, right? And you're talking about mainstream media and how they don't actually represent the people. The media are supposed to be the people to look at something like this and hold these people accountable and say, how can they get away with this? How can they get away with all the lies and all the terrible things that they have done? But the mainstream media, New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, I mean, these people are essentially controlled. How did these mainstream institutions that at one time were supposed to be the arbiters of truth, that were supposed to keep the elites at bay, how did they become the elite themselves?
That is a great question. It's been about 30 years in coming. You look back to people we learned about in high school, Upton Sinclair, right? He wrote the book about the jungle, the meat packing industry. Even he was attacked by the media. I read about that. People don't realize. Now, he was a socialist. He aimed to hit them in the head, but he hit them in the stomach instead. But I think it's a lot of economics. Like I said, there's been a consolidation of media. I think it's fear. I think it's shared politics to an extent. But you have a harmony between the Fourth Estate and government. And I was raided by the FBI in November. They took my phones. And within minutes of the feds leaving my apartment building, again, I haven't been charged with a crime. This is a whole unique story, but a source sent me Ashley Biden's diary, the daughter of Joe Biden. I did not publish it. The feds came coming to my home. And within minutes of me being taken out of handcuffs, the feds just executing a warrant against my home, taking my phones, I get a text message. You know who it's from? The New York Times. And somehow a national security reporter named Mike Schmidt knows the document I'm holding in my hand. How does he know that? But not for sources, people familiar with the matter, inside the Southern District of New York. And you know what? They should be ashamed of themselves. Ben Smith of the New York Times defended me. I had the ACLU defend me. And this paper of record whose slogan was in 1896, operate without fear or favor. Journalists cannot operate in favor of certain institutions. And they lecture me about ethics when they work with and in concert with law enforcement agencies. This is not how it should be. But I think we're winning. I think I'm very hopeful. I'm not cynical, Will. I think we can be successful, but we have to deal with this fear issue. We have to get citizens to not be afraid. And I cannot convince you to do that. I cannot philosophize you to have courage. The only way, I think, is for people to go out and do it, set the example, and that in turn will inspire others to come forward.
Yeah, I mean, that reminds me of with Roger Stone and the FBI working with CNN when it came to that and breaking the exclusive story. I mean, these people have, it seems like, no soul. they're totally fine with going and ruining people's lives if it means they're going to get ratings and run the narrative.
Yeah, and we've been seeing a lot of these news outlets saying they no longer care about objectivity. They don't care about the truth. They care about the narrative. They care about propaganda. And we're seeing reports of their ratings tanking and people like you and Joe Rogan rising in viewership and people watching. Are you seeing people that once would have looked at Project Veritas and scoffed it off sort of gaining more trust in the reporting that you're doing?
Absolutely. Yes. You're not going to convince everybody, right? You know, you're always worried about those 2 to 5% on the extreme of the spectrum. Certainly you're not going to convince them. But I think the vast majority of people were outraged after the raids against me. We had the Society of Professional Journalists come out. We had the ACLU. Will, if I had told you the ACLU a year ago was going to defend me, you thought it would be a crackpot. But what they tend to do, especially people on the left, is they overplay their hand. They push things too far, and then this pendulum kind of swings. And I think journalism is about forging consensus. It's about exposing facts that we can all agree are wrong. You mentioned ratings. We did an expose on CNN. A whistleblower came out and recorded Charlie Chester at the network in April, saying they put the death toll, COVID death numbers on the screen at CNN because it's about they want more people to die. It helps with ratings. To quote Charlie Chester, why can't those numbers be higher? We need those death numbers on the screen. We need more death. So you talk about having a conscience, whether it's narcissism or sociopathy. I'm not a psychologist, but what type of human being do you have to be to put death numbers on the screen and say we need to inflate those numbers? There's a crisis of conscience in media, and people are waking up. I'm extremely optimistic. I know that we can prevent society's collapse, but we got to have courage. We cannot be worried about losing our pensions and our mortgages. There's more to life than worrying about material things. And you see that in the eyes of our whistleblowers who come forward. There's a lot of people out there that are doing this.
You know, what did Winston Churchill say? He said that courage is the most important virtue because that's the virtue that all the other virtues rely on, right? And it truly is the most important thing. People do have to be brave in this moment. And James, I mean, you are what many would call a hero. The things that you are doing, exposing things that are going on. You started this. I mean, I was just reading Andrew Breitbart's book, Righteous Indignation, and he has a whole chapter where he goes through the Acorn, everything you were doing with him then back in the day. I mean, the humble beginnings of that story to now be with the whistleblowers that you have now. It's truly an incredible thing. Everyone needs to support James O'Keefe and Project Veritas. Tell people a little bit about the book and also how they can find it and get their copy.
Well, this book took me 5 years to write. It has some 800 footnotes in it. I tried to patrol the entire a history of ethics and privacy, because people say that we lie, we deceive, we go undercover, we record people without them knowing. I really explore those themes. At the end of the day, it's not about ethics. It's about what you find out. They don't like our findings. A great example of that is David Daleiden being raided by Kamala Harris, who's now the Vice President of the United States. She was the Attorney General of your state of California. She raided the guy who broke the Planned Parenthood body parts story, baby body parts, with a SWAT team. Of course, they would never do that to someone exposing animal cruelty with hidden cameras. So it's really about power and propaganda. It's about cloaking these things with moral arguments. The first chapter of this book is called Suffering. I quote Solzhenitsyn. I talk about the pain, the trauma. Even speaking sort of personally, I was arrested in 2010 in New Orleans. I was eventually vindicated. The raid against me in November. It was terrifying for a minute, and I had to remind myself that that's kind of the point, isn't it? To intimidate us. And I talk about sort of personally what you have to endure, but at the end of the day, you got to do the right thing. You got to follow your conscience in this life. The alternative is much worse. You might preserve certain material things, but if you don't follow your conscience, how can you live with yourself? That's how a lot of people feel. In fact, a lot of my whistleblowers feel that way, and I think that they're happier for it. And there is life after whistleblowing. In fact, with Go Give Send Go now, people have raised $500,000 to support their work in the future. So yeah, it's a very personal book, but it's also a very academic book, and it's a how-to guide on how to do journalism in clown world.
Amazing, James. I truly want to commend you for the work that you're doing. You are not only a brave person, but creating brave people on a day-to-day basis with the work that you do. And I urge everybody to go and get a copy of American Muckraker and support the work that Project Veritas is doing. Again, thank you so much for being on.
Thank you, guys. Look forward to seeing you.
All right, guys, we are with the National Director of Research for the American Federation for Children, Corey DeAngelis. I got all that right this time.
Yep, totally. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, glad to have you here, man. So people who might not know you or what you do, tell the audience a little bit about what you have going on.
Yeah, I'm a school choice advocate, and I push to fund students, not systems. That's the main thrust of the policies I support, allowing families to take their children's taxpayer-funded education dollars to wherever they want their child to get a good education, whether that's in a public school, private school, charter school, or some type of homeschooling option. Okay.
And so are you from California?
No, well, technically, I was born in Sacramento, California.
Okay.
My dad was in the Air Force.
Got it.
But we moved out of here, and I grew up in San Antonio, Texas, for most of my life.
Okay. A much better choice than living here in California. So we live here in California, obviously. You know, PragerU is here. And I can tell you from seeing the education here, I mean, it seems to be worse than ever. What has happened specifically with the COVID pandemic in the school system that has made it just so much worse than before?
Yeah, and I would even say that COVID didn't break the public school system. In a lot of ways, it was already broken. And the past nearly 2 years now has simply shined a spotlight on the main problem with K-12 education all across the country, which happens to be a long-existing, massive power imbalance between the government school monopoly and individual families. It was always failing. We've poured more money into the system year after year without getting any better results. But it got so bad starting in March of 2020 that the buildings were still getting children's education dollars regardless of whether they even opened their doors for business. And the private schools, mind you, were fighting to reopen, and somehow they figured it out from the get-go. Daycares were able to figure it out. Grocery store workers were going back to work. But the public school teachers union monopoly was fighting for the opposite every step of the way. And I don't think it's a problem with the people in the system per se. I think it's a problem with the system itself, that they get your money regardless. And in fact, the teacher unions figured out that they could receive children's education dollars and hold children's education hostage to secure multiple multi-billion-dollar ransom payments from the taxpayer. It's not just that they could keep their benefits in terms of job security and pay while being out there in Puerto Rico vacationing on the beach. It's that they knew that they could actually financially profit from holding children's education hostage. That was the problem. And parents saw that the status quo fought to protect itself every step of the way at the expense of millions of families. Families were scrambling trying to find alternatives. And in Sacramento, nearby where I was born, There was actually a private Catholic school that rebranded itself as a daycare to try to get around the Health County officials' ridiculous closure rules that arbitrarily applied to schools but not to daycares, as if COVID knew that you were learning and it would get you if you were learning something. But that just goes to show you that the private schools were working around and figuring out ways to be innovative to cater to the needs of their customers.
Right.
And there's one other wrinkle to the story is that because remote learning happened in so many places, and let's be clear, there was a lot of unintended consequences associated with remote learning. It's led to it's hurt kids academically, mentally, physically, socially. We've seen mental health issues in children skyrocketing since pre-pandemic levels. Teenage suicide attempts and their emergency department visits associated with those suicide attempts spiked 31% relative to pre-pandemic levels, with even higher increases for female students. It's absolutely atrocious. All of the unintended consequences here. Childhood obesity has been on the rise as well relative to pre-pandemic levels. And the learning loss is just another part of the story as well, that McKinsey & Company's latest analysis still finds that children are still behind about 3 to 4 months in math and reading, which is a huge problem. But the silver lining of all of this mess is that families, through remote learning, or which we shouldn't even call remote learning anyway, it's more like remotely learning because of all the learning loss, or let's just call it remote instruction since the kids weren't learning that much anyway. It allowed families to have an added layer or level of transparency. Parents got to see what was going on in the classroom.
It's like a silver lining of the pandemic almost.
Yeah, absolutely. And parents who thought that their kids were in a great school, maybe it was A-rated by the state, maybe they had high math or reading proficiency rates, parents started to see that there's another dimension to school quality, which is, does that school and what they're teaching align with their values? And a lot of parents saw that their schools aren't as good as they thought they were. So they started to push back at school board meetings. They started to push for school choice policies. And in 2021, I would say the teachers' unions overplayed their hand. They've been so drunk on power for decades now, and it doesn't seem like they can reverse course. They're essentially, at this point, actively destroying their own empire. And 19 states in 2021 alone expanded or enacted programs to fund students as opposed to systems. We're calling 2021 the year of school choice, and I think that is the biggest silver lining of all of this mess.
Right. California, correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe California has no institutions of school choice whatsoever. One of the only, if not the only state to have no sort of school choice. And how do we fix this problem? I mean, school choice, maybe you could also give a little short on what school choice would be to people who don't know what school choice is. How do we implement school choice? You know, when we have a lot of parents in California who are like, we need school choice now, how do we actually make that happen and get it implemented?
Yeah, the basic idea is that the money that would have followed you to your residentially assigned government-run school, you can still take that money there if you like that option. But if not, the money would follow the child to wherever they get an education. That could be another public school. It could be a charter school. It could be a private school, or even a home-based educational option. So it's the basic concept of allowing the money to follow the child to wherever they're getting an education. And it's true, California does not have any private school choice mechanisms that allow the money to follow the child, but California does have some charter schools, which is a very limited option of school choice. There's so much more that families could benefit from by allowing the money to follow them wherever they want their children to get an education. And it is a tough uphill battle in California because of the makeup of the legislature. That's just the fact of the matter, right. Which is interesting, though, because school choice shouldn't be a partisan issue. I mean, just think about it. We already fund students directly with higher education. We have Pell Grants for low-income students. They could take that money to the community college that they want, but you could also take your Pell Grant funding to a public university, a private university, even a religious university. The money follows the decision of the student. Same thing with pre-K programs. Think about the Head Start program. The government doesn't tell low-income families that if they want to use a pre-K program, they have to go to a residentially assigned government-run provider of pre-K, and that would be absolutely ridiculous. Instead, the money goes to the family, and then they can choose public or private, religious or non-religious providers of pre-K services. Same thing with food stamps. Just imagine if we forced low-income families to spend their food stamp dollars at a government-run, residentially assigned provider of groceries. That would be extremely ridiculous.
Right.
Whether you support or oppose food stamps, I think we can all agree that if we're going to spend the money, it should go to people, not buildings. So with school choice, all I'm arguing is that we apply the same logic to K-12 education.
And we have people, I mean, around the world, they have places that have school choice. I mean, Nordic countries have school choice, these socialist paradises that the left likes to talk about. So if we know that school choice works, because we've seen it observed across the world, why does it not get implemented here? I mean, I understand that you obviously, when you have people who are controlled by the teachers union, who do not want to put this in place because it reflects their paychecks, that's going to happen. But is there a deeper issue than that, or is it really just that simple?
It's power dynamics. It's not about logic. It's about power. And just think about it. With all of these other things, the same people who support funding individuals as opposed to institutions with higher education, pre-K, groceries, any other industry in the United States, those same people get all up in arms about the concept and oppose it only when it comes to the in-between years of K-12 education. And the reality is that's because choice is the norm with higher education, pre-K, and everything else. But choice threatens an entrenched special interest only when it comes to the in-between years of K-12 education. That entrenched special interest is the teachers' unions, and they fight as hard as possible against any change to the status quo. And
how much power do they really have? I mean, how much are they spending, or how much power do they really have to influence?
They spend millions
of
dollars. The teachers' union is the largest labor union in the United States, the National Education Association. That's just one of the teachers' unions. We also have the American Federation of Teachers and several state-level affiliates as well. And the problem is they disproportionately donate their campaign contributions to one party over the other.
Right.
Since the past 3 decades, since 1990, if you look at the Open Secrets website, for example, the American Federation of Teachers. Say again? I
love that site.
Oh, it's
one of the best.
Extremely useful.
Yes.
But the AFT, over 97% of their campaign contributions, every single campaign cycle, election cycle, since 1990, over the past 3 decades, over 97% of those contributions have gone to Democrats as opposed to Republicans or independents. So when you're a Democrat in office, you have a strong incentive to listen to one of your biggest funders.
Right.
Even though on the ground, a majority of constituents support the idea of school choice, whether it's Republican, Democrat, or independents. In fact, the latest Real Clear Opinion research polling nationwide found that now 70% of Democrats support the concept of allowing the money to follow the child. It's a nonpartisan issue when you look at the overall general public, but when it gets to the votes in the state houses, that's where the problem arises.
Right.
But I do see, I'm optimistic going forward that this might change because politicians from all parties are starting to understand that there's a new special interest group in town. These parents who are paying more attention than ever. For a long time, it was just the teachers' unions. They had the biggest sway. But now parents, they felt powerless in 2020, and they're fighting right now as hard as possible to make sure they never feel powerless like that ever again.
Do you think that's going to make some people double down? I mean, I'm listening to things like MSNBC or CNN and they're talking parents and saying, "Oh, you're coming and going to a school board meeting, you're a domestic terrorist, or you're threatening our democracy," and things like that. So, do you think that some of that is kind of out of touch with, what the parents actually want, and that they're going to push back even harder in alignment with the teachers unions?
I think that's happened in the short run with major media outlets and some politicians. Terry McAuliffe in Virginia, he said, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach," but we saw how that worked out for him, and he quadrupled down on the anti-parent rhetoric. But in a state that went 10 percentage points to Biden, Youngkin, the Republican candidate that made his whole thing about parental rights and educational freedom, he won by 2 percentage points. So it swung 12 percentage points to the right. And if you look at Washington Post exit polling, Youngkin won with those voters by about 6 to 8 percentage points. And education was the number 2 issue in Virginia, second to only the economy and jobs. So it's becoming a bigger issue. People are paying more attention to education. And I think people are starting to learn from Virginia. You look at Mayor Lori Lightfoot, a Democrat, started to come out against the teachers union and supporting opening the schools in person. Same thing with New York City Mayor Eric Adams, a Democrat. he started to support more charter school options and has supported opening the schools in person in defiance of the major teachers union in New York City. We have Governor Roy Cooper just the other day announced that the last week of January will be North Carolina School Choice Week. He has never made that type of proclamation ever before. And I think we're seeing more politicians from both parties start to understand that if they want to be successful going forward, they have to listen to this new special interest group, the parents who are mobilized. And I think they're starting to understand that these parents aren't going to sit down and shut up no matter how many times members of the establishment try to label them as domestic terrorists. We saw that worked out for the National School Board Association.
Right.
They sent this letter to the Biden administration trying to essentially bully and silence parents into submission. Well, we shouldn't even really call them the National School Board Association anymore. 19 states in the past couple of months have already decided they're going to pull their funding from that organization. We might as well call it the Regional School Board Association at this point.
Yeah.
So if anyone is seeing what's happening with all of this, it's that the takeaway here is that it's politically profitable to side with parents because, look, the reality is parents are going to fight for the right to educate their children as they see fit harder than anyone will ever fight to take that right away from them. And the basic reason for that is that parents care about their kids more than anyone else.
Right.
So politicians going forward, they got to make a decision. Are you going to side with the unions or the parents? And I would argue that siding with the parents is the better path forward if you want to be politically successful.
For sure. And you brought up an interesting point that about, what did these people in Virginia care about? They cared about the economy, they cared about jobs, then they cared about education. Whereas you see so many of these people on the left, I mean, the things that they're pushing, social justice, CRT, gender stuff, climate change, double masking your kids, things that don't matter to the average voter when they see their dollar mean less and their kid getting indoctrinated. Right? They want tangible things. So when we talk about school choice and we say, these kids are going to be able to move around to a different school that's better suited for them, choose the money on where you want to go. But when you have so many terrible schools out there who are pushing this leftist nonsense that most parents don't care about, is school choice the end-all be-all solution to fix that? Or how do we even get in more to say, listen, we can't have this type of indoctrination happening at our schools?
Yeah, I think all of these battles that we've seen bubble up over the past couple of years really make a great argument for school choice. We've seen, should we have in-person versus remote learning? Should we have masking for everybody in the building, or have a choice on the when it comes to the parents deciding for their own kids whether to wear a mask? Should we have mandatory vaccines to go to school or not? Should we have focus on math and reading in the classroom, or should we have CRT? These are all just symptoms of the larger problem, which is a one-size-fits-all government school system. We force all families into this one system that is just by definition not going to work for everybody. And the reason for that is because people disagree about things. We have different values. We have a different way that we would like our children to be raised. And I think it's okay that we differ on those things, but we shouldn't force families into a system where they feel like their child's being brainwashed for 13 years of their life. No one should be forced into that one-size-fits-all scenario. And the best solution going forward is to allow the money to follow the child to an institution that aligns with their family's values. And in fact, there may be an organic response by the public sector because competition works in every industry. We've seen it work with school choice programs when it comes to academic outcomes and behavioral outcomes. The public schools up their game in response to competition. But this could also apply to the CRT debate as well. If families start voting with their feet based on these values-based issues in the K-12 education system, the public schools might say, well, maybe we shouldn't be so political in the classroom, and maybe we should focus on the basics, math, reading, and writing. And so allowing families to vote with their feet will fix both sectors, I think.
Yeah, those are all racist. I mean, math, reading, these are the things that we can no longer talk about now, right? The San Francisco Chronicle, I don't know if you saw this article that came out today that said the parents should give up their children to the government. I mean, I
think that was a parody. It was so bad.
It was a parody?
Well, the thing is, when you click on it, it takes you to a paywall, and I'm not paying the San Francisco Chronicle.
Exactly.
But it was so bad. I think I found another version of it that it was actually a parody, but we're at this point
that's a tough part though. You can't even tell the parody anymore.
Was it Poe's Law or something that we've gotten to such a weird situation that people are so unhinged that you can't really tell if it's a parody unless they actually tell you.
I know. It's gotten so bad. That was kind of the point I was bringing up a little bit, is that, like, okay, for here in Los Angeles, like, let's say they have indoor mask mandates like they do here in Los Angeles. So that means kids are going to school and having to wear the mask. Would school choice fix that type of problem if all the schools in Los Angeles still have to have kids who wear masks in essentially all the public schools? How would you get around a problem like that?
Well, typically these orders are a lot less likely to apply to the private sector, and in fact, in every state that I've seen, whenever a governor tried to close the private schools went straight to court and said, no, you're infringing on our rights.
Right.
They made different arguments about what types of rights were being violated, but school choice would fix this, especially if we expand it to private school choice, because then families could get out of that one-size-fits-all system that the orders are more likely to apply to the public schools than the private schools. And even if it applied to the private schools, this is a great argument for something like an education savings account, where you could use the funding for homeschooling type of options, including micro schools and these pandemic pods where families were getting together in the household, kind of like a homeschooling option that would be even less likely to be regulated than a private school. So this would allow for maximum choice and flexibility for families to sort to the institutions that work for them. And what's interesting about this whole masking debate is that I just wrote in the Wall Street Journal a couple of months ago about a new survey result that came out. We asked families all across the country if they would support vouchers if they disagreed with their public school not mandating masks. And lo and behold, Democrats were overwhelmingly in favor of this because they want their kids in a school that has universal masking,
Right.
or they're more likely to be able to make to want that in their school. So 82% of Democrats that responded with an opinion on the matter supported vouchers to go to a private school if they disagreed with their masking policy in the public school. And what I took from that result was that everybody essentially supports choice if they disagree with what's going on in the public school system. And I think Democrats are starting to figure out that they're not always going to get their way in the public schools. In some cases, it might be that they want mask mandates, and maybe their school doesn't have that mask mandate. We're seeing that unravel in Virginia as well. The new governor, Glenn Youngkin, was sworn in a couple of days ago, and on his day one initiatives, he announced that public schools can't force all kids to wear masks. And now some Democrats, I think, are more likely to support school choice than they ever have before because of that.
Right. No, it's like the argument with hate speech that you hear from so many of these people on the left. Like, oh, if you say something that's offensive, you shouldn't be allowed to say it. And then it's like, well, you say that now because you're in charge. Mm-hmm. You're in charge of the university, the media, all these different things. And it's like, if conservatives were in charge and we had these same things, I don't think you'd like it very much. You'd be very much in favor of free speech, just like you were back in the 1960s with more of a, conservative way about the West. But Corey, you're on fire, man. Really appreciate you doing this. Where can people find out about you, support you, help everything you're doing? I think it's an incredibly important fight.
Totally. Thank you so much. And you can follow me on Twitter. It's at DeAngelis Corey. And if you want to help us in the fight for education freedom, you can go to the educationfreedompledge.com. educationfreedompledge.com.
Awesome. Thank you so much, man. Appreciate it. Hope to have you back on again.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me.
Two terrific men. We're really proud of them and all the hard work that they're doing for this country. Make sure that you guys are checking them out on social media. Get James' book, which comes out tomorrow, and make sure that you are following Patriots and supporting them with everything they're doing. We're now going to get into Dear Will and Amala.
Perfect. Our Monday advice segment. You guys submitted through our Instagrams questions that you needed advice on at the Will Witt, at Amala Benobi, at Taylor Trandle. And you can follow us all there and have the chance to be featured on our show. So here's question number 1. Dear Will and Amala, advice for applying for a job from Emily MD CTY.
I think you have to read it. Advice for applying for a job? You have to go up at the end.
Sorry,
like
my inflection was wrong. Any initial thoughts, guys? Wow. Have you guys ever applied for a job before?
I've applied for a myriad of positions.
Okay.
I've had a lot of jobs. And every time I applied for a job, what was important was that I am willing to go above and beyond, and also I have skills that are outside of the skill set that they are looking for. Because they'll find a million candidates who all have the skills. I mean, if they put social media marketer, everyone applying is going to know something about social media marketing. What else do you know how to do? Do you know how to edit videos as well? Do you know how to speak? Do you know how to write? You know, like,
Do you know martial arts?
right? Exactly.
Right.
Do you know how to
Right.
how to skin a deer in under 60 seconds? Like, these are important
important
tasks.
things.
They
You
are.
know. So, but seriously, having skills that are outside of the realm of what they expect of you is how you're really going to be able to knock them out of the park.
Yeah, and where you don't have those skills, make sure you elaborate on the fact that you are a fast learner. I think it's really important. I did a lot of research looking into the gender wage gap as it pertains to women in America, and it said a vast majority of women are uncomfortable applying for jobs that they are not 100% qualified for. So where men will go and take risk and say, you know what, I'm not qualified for this job, but I've got personality, you know, I've got these skills and I'm a fast learner, they'll go and apply and they'll get those jobs, and women don't even take the chance. So you don't have to apply for a job that you're 100% qualified for. Just be ready and ambitious and wanting to be a fast learner, and make sure that comes through in whatever interview that you're doing. I found so often in interviews that I've done for jobs that your personality can sort of surpass what they're looking for qualifications wise. And if they want somebody who's going to be there long term and who's going to learn, because things are constantly changing. So make sure you reiterate that throughout your interview. Taylor?
Answered perfectly.
Answered perfectly.
T-Dog?
Just to shed a little light on the flip side of things, another tactic you can use, and this is maybe, you really have to understand where you're at in terms of like your leverage, your experience, how much like professional experience you have relative to the job you're applying for. Another tactic you can use though is if you're overqualified for a job at a place that you want to work, you can apply somewhere that you know you want to be for something you're overqualified for to get your foot in the door. And then once you get in the interview, they'll fall in love with you and be like, well, wait. And then that's where it's like, well, but I was actually looking for something that's a little more, you know, that more commensurate with my experience. And that I've had that. I mean, that's partly how I got into PragerU as well. So that's another flip side of that tactic.
Woo 'em, baby.
I have another piece of advice.
Go for it.
Be black or
It's
a
also
woman
helpful.
or trans or gay.
Very helpful.
And if you're one of those things, you have a lot better chance.
Yep. Look for places that have diversity departments.
Hey, we covered this last week, but the number one, according to LinkedIn, new study, number one fastest growing job position is a vaccine specialist. And the number two is a diversity, equity, inclusion manager. So,
Yes.
Fantastic.
yeah, just give your life to those very worthy ends, and then you will have a job
The
immediately.
odds
will
are in
die
your favor.
alone.
I hope we answered your question, Emily.
Yeah, perfectly.
Hopefully you're black.
Another question, perfectly answered.
Nailed it.
Next one. Dear Will and Amala, how do I stand against critical race theory in my schools? This is from I am Andrea or Andrea 5. I'll start. Okay. Easy. It's not really a top-down process. It's a down-top process. So find out where it's happening. If it's happening in your kid's classroom, your first step is to talk to the teacher. Find out where the teacher's getting the curriculum from. The teacher's probably getting the curriculum from the school board. Then you're going to want to head over to your school board fully armed with what your teacher has told you, with the curriculum that your child is learning. And now you're placing blame on the school boards. How did this go from you down to the teachers, down to my child, and hold them accountable for that. Get the answers for that, and come armed with the points in the curriculum that are wrong. So don't just come and say, well, you guys are talking about race to my child, and I'm uncomfortable with that. Make specific points as to why it is wrong and what they're teaching that is wrong. And, you know, always videotape it. Always videotape it. And that's in this new age of social media and media journalism. Social media journalism, that can be really, really powerful, because not only is your message going to be seen by everybody in that room at the school board meeting, but now it's going to be seen by everybody in the world, basically. So you just want to find ways to elevate your message. Another thing is calling local newspapers and making it a big deal within the community. Get not only you, but other parents, other educators, and other students talking about it. That's my start.
Yeah. I was going to say the same about recording it. That's really strong.
Yep.
And just be prepared for people to say horrible things about you if you're going to stand for it.
Mm-hmm.
So have that type of perseverance and strength to have people say terrible things, and be ready for that. They will. Right. They will come after you for standing up for it.
Yeah. And please come armed with facts of knowing what critical race theory is, knowing the arguments that the left has for teaching critical race theory, and being able to debunk them. A video I did prior last week was me going over my debate with Mark Lamont Hill. And I've watched so many of his interviews with other conservatives who came to battle against critical race theory, who didn't know what critical race theory was, who have never read a paper about it, who didn't even know what the foundation of the theory is. And if you don't have those facts, do you even know what you're fighting against? So it's important to look into that and be armed, because you don't want to look stupid in front of people who are trying to make you look exactly like that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Taylor, anything to add?
I mean, you brought up the point of the only thing I was going to get up besides, you want to be recording things, know your facts. But yeah, just make sure that you are able to delineate between, because they're going to say, well, you don't want history taught, and you need to be able to delineate and say, this is, of course, we want to teach accurate history, but we don't want to be teaching what critical race theory teaches, which is this lens of racializing every interaction. And the question isn't, did racism occur, but where did racism occur? And the solution to past discrimination is present discrimination. And that's critical race theory. When you hear things like that, whenever white kids are being told that they're oppressors and black kids are being told that they're oppressed, and those are the types of things that it's not. And even being able to say, we can teach them about because they'll say it's a legal theory, whatever. It's like, okay, well, we can teach about a legal theory. We can tell kids, hey, this legal theory exists. But when we're teaching through the lens of critical race theory, when we're teaching through the lens of critical pedagogy, then that is wrong. And that's where you need to place your criticism and not not let them play those games to obfuscate.
You got to get 2 steps ahead, ladies and gentlemen. Next question. Dear Will and Amala, I'll be the only one who can answer this.
Let me tell you about this. Yeah, we all got
I'm going to actually let Will answer this. Has Amala been able to change her mom's view? And this is from Laufenberg Nicole. Will, you want to go ahead and...
Yes, Amala's mom is now... she was actually at January 6th. She stormed the Capitol.
She actually works for PragerU now.
Yeah, exactly.
She's in the development
she's an insurrectionist.
Right.
Capital Mima.
Right.
That's Amala's mom.
Yeah. No, guys, of course not. My mom still believes what she believes, and that is her prerogative, and we don't really talk about it all that much. We talk about our lives, our relationship as mother and daughter, all outside of that, all outside of politics, which I am more than happy with. So my mom maintains her views, and I maintain mine, and it's all good.
It's good. Yeah, I don't let my family be leftists.
Oh, you don't let them?
I tell them the truth.
Do you want to explain?
Well, like if my
your system,
if they say something that's wrong, I say, Mom, that's wrong.
Sure.
And
I do that with
wrong.
my mom too, but we don't talk politics anymore, so it just doesn't really come up ever.
Right.
Yeah. Taylor, how's your family?
My family's pretty conservative. I have a couple. No, I have a couple family members who are definitely not conservative, but I don't know. Yeah. I put the family relationship above that, and you kind of table the politics.
As you all should. Yeah.
You definitely should. But that doesn't mean that you let your family walking around with nonsense.
Yeah. I mean, you don't be a pushover about these topics.
Exactly.
And,
sure.
Don't let them walk all over you or say things that you disagree with and you say nothing. But at the same time, I'm not going to be the one that makes it impossible to have a relationship.
Right. Of course.
Yeah, if it comes up, you confront it. But other than that, everything's fine. Moving on. Dear Will and Amala, who's the funniest person you know from Craig Straz?
Definitely not Craig Straz. I will say that. He's probably the least funny.
Craig is the palest person I know.
He is the palest. Pale Craig. You guys remember Pale Craig.
That's the first funny thing I've ever heard Amala say.
Wow. Craig really isn't the palest person I know, but...
No. No.
The name sticks.
He's one of the palest people I know.
Yeah. One of.
I've met some pretty pale people, let me tell you.
Who actually is the funniest person that you know? You guys? Anything come to mind? Other than me, I get it.
Yeah, other than Amala?
Mm-hmm.
I don't know.
Taylor's one of the funniest people.
I know. You got to think outside of this room, though. Of course, I think Will's funny.
No.
But
my grandma cracks me up. Every time I'm on the phone with my grandmother, I'm just laughing my butt off. How's that? So I think my grandma is the funniest person I know. And it's funny because she's not intentional about it. Like, she's not trying to be funny sometimes. And she just talks and I can't not laugh.
Yeah.
So
I would maybe... No, I'm not going to say Jake, but Jake is one of the funny guys who I know.
Jake is Will's best friend.
Yeah, he's really funny. He's a good guy. I don't know. All I know is it's not Craig.
Okay.
That's all I know.
Taylor?
I met John Christ standing outside of a Nashville eatery once. And
who's John Christ?
He's a professional comedian on Instagram.
And you asked him to tell you a joke?
No. But
no.
And he would not remember me, but I met him, so I'll just say that.
That's the funniest person you know. Okay.
I met Gabriel Iglesias one time in a Wendy's. And
Hey, Who's the funniest person you've ever met?
Ooh.
Exactly.
I don't
I've
know.
met my grandmother.
A lot of people say I'm one of the funniest people they've ever
Oh my gosh.
See, that was funny. Look, you're laughing.
Oh
See, that was
my
funny.
God.
I pushed the wrong button. I meant
No,
to
it
push.
still works.
What?
The womp womp still works
Oh, you
too.
don't have your headphones.
Oh, I don't have my headphones on. No.
Yeah.
You know, we could just
There's no
be,
video.
We could just be
Wow.
blasting you with sound effects. And you don't know the
I
difference.
know.
We're
I
just
know.
making fun of you in our headphones. Moving on. Next question. Dear Will and Amala, how to master your thoughts and emotions in dire situations, from Adele M. Hajar 02. I hope I said your name right. I don't know that I did.
From the.
Will doesn't
Yeah.
know anything about this topic. He hates this question.
I hate this question.
Yeah.
No, I love this question. These are my favorite types of questions.
So
It's almost like you picked
I did pick the questions today. Amala usually picks the
Yeah, I
questions,
do.
but I picked them. I picked them
I
today.
picked the dating ones.
Yeah.
Those are my favorite.
You have to become a master of yourself. Become a master of yourself and learn to handle all of your emotions and all of the desires and passions and everything that you feel and experience in the world. That is the only way to truly live a happy life. If you let the outside world dominate you, if something bad in your life happens to you and you let that overcome you and say, I'm going to have this bad situation define me, then you will be a weak-willed person and it will only make your happiness and suffering worse. Instead, when you are in a dire situation, you take that situation and you embrace it and you make that a part of yourself. And you say, now I'm going to dominate this situation and master it and learn how to conquer it, instead of saying, oh, this thing has happened to me. I'm going to think about how bad this has made me feel. Take everything bad that happens to you and dominate it. That is how you become a master of yourself. Don't look for other people to solve it or to feel bad about it. You dominate all of your emotions and bad things that happen within your life.
Taylor, I have to think about this a little bit more before I answer. I want to give a profound, good thought through answer, but
Self-overcoming.
Yeah, I mean, I mean that is the right answer, but I know for a lot of people, and it's easier said than done, especially people who are like more emotional by nature, and it's tough to, like, when you're in a certain emotional state and when you're in a dire situation, your rational mind is often goes in your back seat, and you're not in a state where you're able to confront the situation rationally. So I mean, it can be, if you have the time, it's like maybe if you have to get into like emergency mode whenever, okay, there's a dangerous situation or something, then focus on what you can control. Focus on your agency in the situation. But if it's something like in a bigger picture where it's like a big decision in your life or something stressing you out or whatever, it can be helpful to like get away for a minute, get out of that emotional state, think rationally about it, and then come back to it. And anyway, so that's just one little piece of advice is for like how to deal with this, is like get out of the emotional state where you're not thinking rationally, and detach a little bit, talk to someone who's rational, help them work, have them help you process your thoughts about it, and that can help you actually work on solutions instead of just being lost in emotion, because you're not really going to get anywhere as long as you're responding out of a place of emotion.
yeah, I'm trying to think about this, because you could say, just, I don't know, you can compartmentalize your thoughts and emotions, and that's probably not the thing that you should do. I think what you have to do is have markers where you recognize what emotions you're feeling in these dire situations, and then you find a different way to channel them. That way you're not, holding yourself back from feeling it or bottling it up, which we all know that doesn't work. So if you wake up a certain day and you're in a situation that's got you feeling sad, do you channel that through writing or listening to music? If you're angry, through boxing or letting out aggression and doing things like that. If it's a dire situation, which I'm assuming requires immediate action, grounding exercises are really good, because you can get really stressed out and you have to just sort of ground yourself and say, you know what, I'm sitting here, I'm at this table, this is where I'm at in the world, I have to make a decision now. What is in my control, in my immediate reach, which is what Taylor said, hearkening on that. So if it's a dire situation that requires immediate action, just grounding yourself, taking an understanding of what your place is. But if it's something where your emotions and thoughts are just overwhelming you and you have time, channel the things that you want to do. Like if I'm angry and I want to go and scream at somebody, maybe I'll do something else aggressive that doesn't harm people. Same thing for sadness. But yeah, just find ways to channel your emotions, because you're going to feel them regardless. just how do you get them over with? Anything else, guys?
I'll say one other tactic in the dire situation that, I mean, I don't know, this helps me, but it's like, imagine the worst thing that you fear to happen happens, and then kind of like come to terms with that.
Yep.
And then realize everything I do from now to whatever ends up happening is an improvement from that place, you know? And so start working, you know, from that place, because I think we just freeze and get stuck in just this, you know, limbo of you're frozen in the shock or whatever. And I think just going to the place and confronting that fear head on and coming to terms with it, and that is the start of overcoming it.
You have to confront it. Yeah, I agree with everything you said, except for the part about separating yourself from it. You seen Fight Club?
Yeah.
In Fight Club, when the narrator, the main character, he's doing those meditations, and they say, find your cave. And then he sees the penguin, and they're basically telling him to separate himself from the things that he feels. And he eventually realizes that that is the wrong thing, that you shouldn't separate yourself from what you feel, and you should embrace all of the horrible things that happen to you to be able to tackle them head on.
Yeah, I think
Nietzsche said to pray for suffering. Pray for suffering in your life so that you can become a better man to overcome it. Don't try and it's like the Eastern religion, Buddhism. I don't subscribe to any of it because it tells you that you want a life without suffering. It's just impossible. You know, a life without dire situations. It's just not true. You know, reaching nirvana, a life without suffering and pleasure and all this is just, no, you want suffering. Because you will have it, and you want to embrace it and learn from it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say that you should like not confront things and like flee from negative emotion. What I do mean is that when your mind is in a confused and emotional state, you're not in the best frame of mind to confront things. And so you want to maybe take a step back, get out of that emotional state, like Amala was saying, whatever, you know, whether it's a grounding exercise or, you know, hey, go play video games for a while, get out of that like doom and gloom mood. And then so you can like, okay, I'm going to confront this thing. So don't ever not confront things, because it will just get bigger and bigger until it consumes you.
Yeah. I'm also a big fan of what's going to happen is going to happen. And once it's done, it is done. And then you're here and you're in this world.
Sarah.
Yeah. So, yeah, there's only so much that's in your control. Last one here. It's from a little hater. This is why I put my little hater clip art on there. How do you deal with knowing nothing you do means anything? I'd love to know how you do that. From Andy Rue 36. Very angry.
How do you do it?
I love how, like, you know how Andy in The Office has anger management problems? This is the Andy that I'm picturing.
It's pretty similar. It's quite similar. I don't think their profile picture looked like that.
I don't think so either, but I am picturing him.
I can see the impacts that we are having. It's quite incredible with just the show, with the videos, with the speeches, with books, I mean, everything that I do and everything that Amala does. I mean, there is quite the impact that is being done, especially when you look at the numbers, when we survey people and see how people vote and all of this of what's changing in the culture. It's pretty impossible to say that the things that we are doing is having no impact.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. How do you deal with knowing nothing you do means anything? And I think it's a different way of looking at the world. I think that everything you do means everything. I think that walking down the street and telling a random girl that you like her hair means something. So it's just, I don't know. All I see in this is an angry person. So I think everything that you do.
They are not a master of themselves.
No, everything you do means something, down to the littlest thing, down to me sitting right here in front of this camera. So whatever, Andy.
Buzz off, Andy.
Whatever, Andy.
Kick rocks.
I'm going to put you into forced anger management, just like Michael Scott.
Okay.
And all I would add here is that even if everything that we're doing with this show, even if everything I'm doing with my life is not having the ideal impact in my mind, at the end of the day, I'm here because I believe in what I'm doing, and I believe I'm doing the right thing. And so that is meaningful in itself enough.
Yeah.
You know, I don't, I'm not judging it by the impact. I'm judging it by what I know to be the right thing. And
Right, you stand up for
thing,
truth regardless. Yeah. And Dennis Prager, the best piece of advice he ever gave me is that if I were to giving any sort of speech, make it the most important speech in my life, no matter where it is, if it's a small group of people, large, you know, because you have no idea who you might impact in that time that you're doing it.
Yep.
And so it doesn't always matter the audience. It matters that you are standing for truth and that you are doing it the right way. So That's the most important thing. Taylor, you were spot on.
Sweet.
Take that to the bank, Andy.
Cash it in.
Yeah, that's the end of Dear Will and Amala. So thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the advice question segment and the interviews with James O'Keefe and Corey DeAngelis. If you guys want to submit your own advice questions to be featured on the show next Monday, go and follow us on Instagram at the Amala Epinobi, at the Will Witt, at Taylor Trandle, and you could be featured on our show. Guys, we are on another channel now, Will and Amala Live. We're streaming both at PragerU and there. Plus, we're going to cut exclusive clips from Will and Amala Live on the Will and Amala Live channel. You guys were asking for it. Now you have received. Go and subscribe to us down there. Eventually, we're going to be exclusively streaming on that channel. So go and subscribe before it's too
on that
late.
YouTube channel. We'll still be on Rumble and Facebook.
Yes, we will still be on Rumble
And Twitch.
and Facebook.
And Twitch.
And Twitch with the 2 people who watch on there.
God bless
So,
you, 2 watchers
yeah,
on Twitch. We love
whoever
you.
you are. We love you to pieces. Guys, thank you so much for watching. Answer down below, how do you deal with stress and emotions and thoughts in dire situations? I think that's some advice that everybody could use. And we will see you tomorrow at 2:30 Pacific, 5:30 Eastern. Bye, guys.